All right, here we go with number 15. All right, so 15 says, write one positive cosine equation for the graph below. Now, there are a lot of positive cosines. There's one here, there's one here. All right, so you can kind of pick where you want to start. I'm going to start with our first curve here. Okay, so right away, I can tell that my midline is still here. So my amplitude is still 3. The period, I start at 5 pi over 3, or 5 pi over 8, excuse me. Or I end at 5 pi over 8, and I start at pi over 8. So the period is still 4 pi over 8, which is still pi over 2. All right. In my work from the last one, pi over 2 equals 2 pi over b. b ended up being 4. All right. How did I get that? Remember from our last one, I do b pi times b equals 4 pi. Okay. Horizontal shift. Now that's the difference right here. That's the difference. There is no vertical shift since our midline is 0, so that's none. Horizontal shift is a big difference. Well, I'm no longer starting at pi over 4 like the last one. I moved right. I'm just going to write r pi over 8. Okay, so our final equation, it's positive. My amplitude is still 3. I have cosine. My b value is 4 still. The only thing that changes is my horizontal shift, right pi over 8. And there is not a d value because there is no vertical shift. And that's our equation for our cosine. Okay. Remember that sine and cosine, their graphs are closely related, but our horizontal shifts are what change here. That's the only value that really changed. All right. I did a lot more work on the last one because I didn't need to do as much on this one. That's pretty sick. Okay. Okay. Loving it. Loving it. Loving it. So, amplitude. Remember, your amplitude is found by taking the absolute value of A. So my amplitude here is 3. My period is, well, this B value is nicely factored out for us. So it's 2 pi divided by 1/2. Divide by a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal, multiply by 2 over 1. So my period is 4 pi. My intervals are nice. 4 pi. Let's go like this. We're going to go 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. Horizontal shift is this value here. That's our C value. So I'm going to the left, pi over 4. And vertical shift is up 1. All right. So remember that. Remember, when I have a vertical shift up 1, that changes my midline. So my midline is now at 1. My amplitude, that means I'm traveling up 3 units from the midline. So 1, 2, 3. So that's actually going to be at 4. And then down 3 units. 1, 2, 3. So our minimum value is -2. I horizontal shifted to the left pi over 4. So I'm going to start at negative pi over 4. My intervals are pi. So to find my next tick mark, I'm going to do negative pi over 4 plus pi. I need a common denominator, so negative pi over 4 plus 4 pi over 4. So if I add these two together, I get 3 pi over 4. So my next tick mark should be 3 pi over 4. Add 4 pi over 4 again. 7 pi over 4. Add 4 pi over 4 again. 11 pi over 4. Add 4 pi over 4 one more time, so I have 5 tick marks. 15 pi over 4. All right. And because I'm going to slide this over just a little bit more, all right, because these are supposed to be a length of 1 pi. May move these around. All right. If it's not exact in your picture, that's all right. Try to make it as neat as possible. Okay. And we have a negative. Oh, buckets. Don't forget about the negative. So I flip it. I flip it. I flip it. I flip it. So I start at the midline. Oh boy. There's these. Since it's a negative, I flip. I go down to my minimum. Back to my midline. Up to my maximum. And back down to the midline. And then connect my dots. Let's see how we do. Oh, man. It's going so well. Technically, we're supposed to have arrows here because it's going on forever in both directions. All right, because it does not stop. It just continues. Okay? There's 16. Man, these are so... Having a lot of fun here. Having a good time? Are you? I know I am. Why not? Let's keep going. All right, so, whoops. Amplitude, there's no number attached, so amplitude is 1. All right, no number in front, so you can assume that it's 1. Period. I want to take out a 2. So I have 2 times x minus pi over 2. I'm dividing pi by 2, because that's my fraction. So I have 2 pi over b, which is 2, so my period is pi. Intervals. Divide your period by 4. Horizontal shift. I move to the right. This is my c value right here. Pi over 2. Vertical shift. Down 2. All right, down 2. Oh boy. So I move down 1, 2. Draw my midline. -1, -3, because my amplitude is 1. So I travel up 1 unit from the midline and down 1 unit from the midline. My horizontal shift is right pi over 2. Okay. My intervals are pi over 4. That's pretty neat. So I can do, I'm going to write my work, I'll just stay consistent. Pi over 2 plus pi over 4. Well, pi over 2, if I find my common denominator, that's 2 pi over 4 plus pi over 4 equals 3 pi over 4. Wow. Wow. So that's 3 pi over 4. Add pi over 4, I get 4 pi over 4, just pi. Add pi over 4, I get 5 pi over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Add pi over 4, I get 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. All right. So what kind of function we have? We have a cosine function here. It's not flipped. Okay, so I'm going to start at my maximum here. Go to my midline. Down to my minimum. Back to the midline, and back up to my maximum. And connect the dots. There you go. We just put it all together. Boy, was that fun. Boy, was that neat. I feel accomplished. I hope you do too. All right, happy studying. Adios.